Excellent. Why don't we get started? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Florence Hudson, and I'm Executive Director of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub and the Data Science Institute at Columbia University in New York. And along with my colleagues, Emily Rothenberg, who's Program Manager for the National Student Data Corps, which is really an international group of over 22,000 people that you might be part of, and Ishmeen Garwal, who's one of our grad students at the Hub. We're delighted to welcome you to episode number 6 of the National Student Data Corps Masterclass Series. You may have seen some of the others on precision oncology, and we actually had one on sports analytics from the perspective of an academic a couple years ago. But we're really delighted to have Iwao Fusillo from the New York Jets, which is a National Football League football team, as in the one with your hand, not with your foot, in the United States. And he's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at the New York Jets. And it's so fascinating. I saw him present at a Microsoft Innovation Center about a month ago. And a couple of cool things happened. One, I was like, wow, this is so cool. He talks about the business side, the player side, and as we work with students and professionals at the Big Data Hub, through our community of actually over 25,000, including beyond the students, we talk about, so how do people really use data, and how does it really apply, and what's the reality of it? And so Iwao did a great job of showing that. And so we thought, well, let's invite him to tell everybody else. So we're so delighted that he could join us today. And another funny thing, well, while I was watching him present, he mentioned he was an aerospace engineer. I was like, oh, that's funny. I am too. And I was looking at his LinkedIn and I'm like, Princeton University, are you kidding me? So we went to the same school and have the same major. We're like, wow, this is the coolest thing on the planet. So we're like coming home together again, or something like that, coming back together again, both coming from the same university and the same major. Without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Iwao Fusillo, who's going to be presenting from data to decisions in sports, from the perspective of the New York Jets football team. Iwao, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Florence, and thank you to everyone for having me. Uh, I wanted to share a little bit up front about the New York Jets. And so as you can see here, the New York Jets created the franchise's first Chief Data and Analytics Officer role. As Florence said, I am very, very fortunate to hold this role. And as far as we know, this is the only such position among all of the 32 NFL teams today. And again, this is the sport where you use your arms and you throw the ball, not the other football, which I like as well, by the way. So you might ask, well, what makes this particular role, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer role, so unique, right? That the Jets would actually step out and be the first. Well, the remit is unique, as you'll see further on in the presentation, but it's unique at a high level in three ways. One, it spans both the football analytics, meaning the game side, and business analytics. At the NFL, we are the only team to have both functions reporting into a single executive. And I'll come back to the advantages of that in just a few moments. It also includes IT and application development. These are functions that are typically part of the CTO, CIO remits. And I'll explain in a little bit as to why. Oh, I have that automatic energy saver light thing going on. But I'll come back in a little bit as to why this particular combination gives us a speed advantage. And I think you'll find it quite fascinating, actually. And then the third piece that makes things very unique is that we have in my team an organizational mandate that comes from our owner, Woody Johnson himself, to make the Jets the best AI-driven team in all of sports. Um, why don't we go, Emily, to the next page? Next page is a bio, and we'll certainly be sure to get the bio out to you so you could do a little bit of a self-read. Florence has already revealed to you that we are both aerospace engineers. And one question I often get is, how does an aerospace engineer end up running analytics for his number one favorite sports team? And Florence already knows the answer to this. It's better to be lucky than smart. And I will come back to exactly why it is better to be lucky than smart. But I will wrap up today's discussion with some thoughts on how all of you, wherever you are in your educational career, your professional careers, how can you be unlike me and be both lucky and smart? And so I have some pointers towards the end here to bring that to home. All right, let's go to the next page. Yeah, and we're going to start with a bit of historical context. We're not going to jump right into sports because to understand sports analytics, we need to understand what I like to call the three technology revolutions. So, Emily, let's go to the next page. This is my version of the data compute and AI revolutions, and we're going to start on the left-hand side of the page here. A show of virtual hands. How many of you know what the iPod was back in the early 2000s? A show of virtual hand. Oh, okay. I'm starting to see a bunch of, all right. All right. A lot of you know. What a remarkable device. A $299 device that could store 10,000 songs, which today doesn't sound like much, right? We all have our phones, and our phones can do a whole lot more than store 10,000 songs. But when I was a student, a grad student, about a decade earlier, the cost to store one song was in fact $3,000. And the only way you could store that song was to buy an external hard drive. How portable is an external hard drive, right? So this consumer phenomenon actually bled into the commercial realm. And with data storage suddenly becoming commercially viable, businesses could store everything, every transaction, every click, every sensor reading, every customer interaction. And data storage went from this theoretical construct to being a real thing for businesses. Now, you can see the number two arrow there and the compute revolution. And that happened a few years later. There was another consumer phenomenon, not music, that led to this compute revolution. Can anyone guess what this teenage consumer phenomenon was that led to the compute revolution? So it's not music. It's not social media because that wasn't a thing back then. What was it? You can drop your answers in the chat. Any guesses from anyone? Cloud's a good guess. Texting is a good guess. Think compute. Think compute. Oh, streaming, that's a good one. It was video game. You got it. Video games. Video games was the single biggest driver. Almost everything that you put in the chat were in fact drivers, but video games, given the intensity of the graphics and how they had to be manifested in real time, led to the earliest versions of the NVIDIA GPU. NVIDIA wasn't quite a thing back then, but Intel Pentium was. And that revolution unlocked the ability for businesses to begin analyzing all of the data that they began storing and to do so at scale. But in between these two revolutions, and you won't find this in any textbook because I made it up. Okay, I made up this concept called the Moneyball signal. There was a team, a baseball team in 2002 called the Oakland A's. The general manager, Billy Beane, hired an analyst out of Yale. Was not Princeton, Florence. So what are you going to do? So Paul DePodesta out of Yale was hired by Billy Beane. And what Billy Beane proved is that you could use data instead of money to win in the game of baseball. What does that mean? Well, in the game of baseball, the dominant teams at the time had very, very large payrolls. And what they would do is they would use those very, very large payrolls to recruit single superstar baseball players, home run hitters, pitchers, and the like. What Paul DePodesta and Billy Beane proved is that using data and analytics, they could build these single, very expensive superstar players in the aggregate with multiple cheaper players. And that was the beginning of it all in terms of leveraging analytics for sports. Such the phenomenon this was that Michael Lewis, the famous author, the next year in 2003 wrote a book called Moneyball, and many years later there was a movie with Brad Pitt also called Moneyball. It was a wake-up call, certainly for sports, but more significantly for every industry you could think of. Finance, retail, healthcare, telecom. Everybody realized gold was sitting in the data that they began to store because of the data storage revolution. Some folks may remember the Netflix prize. This was the $1 million prize awarded to the person, the group, the uh, uh, the academic pod who could beat the company's Netflix movie recommender algorithm. And I'm not even sure if anyone ever won it after all these years, but it was quite the phenomenon. Today, Amazon's product recommenders are actually rooted in many of the uh, patented algos that came to being in that time. Harrah's Casino, many a business school case have been written about Harrah's Casino. The famous Harvard Business School case is the one that started it all back in the 2003 era. Harrah's, for those of you who don't know, casino operator, typically ran the crummiest properties on the strip, like the crummiest. However, they were the most profitable properties on the strip because of data and analytics. And so all of these things were happening. And then as you look at arrow number three, today we sit right at the cusp of the third revolution, artificial intelligence and large language models, LLMs. And the companies that really invested in the first two revolutions back in the 2000s are now at the center of this revolution. So, Emily, if we go to the next page, I wanted to bring this to life a little bit. And you can see the one, two, and three here numbered, these three revolutions. I wanted to map out my career across these same revolutions just to give you a sense of how much change, these revolutions drove in the general marketplace. So way back in 1990, when I completed my graduate degree, I started as an FP&A associate, financial planning and analysis associate at Chase, as you can see on the far left there. And I didn't move too far when I transferred to American Express. I moved to the related field of corporate finance. And over the next decade at American Express, I had a wonderful career, my first career, and ultimately became the co-head of mergers and acquisitions for the company. And quite frankly, had I continued on in that career path, I believe I would have had a wonderful career, maybe growing into the chief growth officer, the chief innovation officer, the chief strategy officer, something along those lines. But this is the better lucky than smart. As luck would have it, that's not what I did, as you can see on the chart, because there's a major inflection point labeled arrow number one there. That happens to coincide with that Moneyball signal, as I talked about on the prior slide. Um, the chief risk officer of American Express, who I came to know through my mergers and acquisitions work, asked me to take a walk with him. Actually, not very far from this facility here in New Jersey. It was in Parsippany, New Jersey. We were in a temporary building. And he said, "Hey, come take a walk with me." And it was such a shock for the chief risk officer of the company to stop by my desk. "Hey, come take a walk with me. I forgot to bring my coat." And it was in the middle of winter. Didn't seem to bother. His name is Ash Gupta. So Didn't bother Ash at all. I was freezing. And Ash says to me, "Do you know what data and analytics is?" And I said, "Ash, no, I don't." And he said, "Well, data and analytics will fundamentally transform banking. And I do intend to make American Express first, with possibly Capital One following very, very closely in our footsteps." And he said, "I'd like you to build the company's first data and analytics function." And, this is all while I'm freezing in a Parsippany, New York parking lot in the old Lucent building. And I said, "Well, Ash, don't you have hundreds of risk management leaders in your organization who would be better at building this?" And he said a couple of things to me. One, he said, "Iwao, you studied aerospace engineering, right, Florence? It comes back to aerospace engineering. You studied that as an undergrad. You can do the math. We may teach you how to apply that math in this particular scenario, but you can do the math." And that's really table stakes anyway. When you think about a data and analytics program, it's largely a company-wide transformation. And so what I really need, in addition to somebody who can do the underlying math, is someone who can explain very, very complex concepts to the marketing organization, to the customer service organization, to the sales organization, to HR, to legal, to wherever we're going to deploy data and analytics. And what Ash said to me is, "I saw you do that over the past decade in mergers and acquisitions." And so it began for me, right? And this is truly a better lucky than smart, because, I didn't know anything about data and analytics. And so from there, it took me about 7 years to build that data and analytics function for American Express's consumer business. Think the American Express consumer card, the platinum card, gold card, blue. And it took 7 years because there was no blueprint. I had no peers in the industry, right? We were leading it. Infrastructure, I kid you not, the servers, because there was no such thing as cloud computing. The infrastructure cost us $961 million. We had to go to the board to go get approval. And so these things that we take for granted today, wow, took a while. And then after building the consumer business, I was asked to build the equivalent for American Express's B2B or commercial business. And that took 3 years, right? Because there was a blueprint, there was a playbook, we didn't have to buy the infrastructure again, et cetera. So that was the single biggest inflection point in my career for sure. But there is a second arrow there labeled number two. So there is a second inflection point. And that is when the NFL came calling to ask me to build their data and analytics function. And you know what I said when they first called me? I said, "I'm not interested." I said, "I'm very happy here at American Express. I don't know anything about American football. I grew up in Japan. I'm a baseball pro." Every excuse in the book. And so the NFL said a couple of things to me. They said, "Well, first of all, we know you don't know anything about American football," which in and of itself was kind of scary at the time. How would they know that? But somehow they knew it. Okay, that's fine. So you were looking for someone who's done data and analytics at scale, I gather. Yes, that's right. And the second thing they said to me was, the person you'll be reporting into, should everything work out, is the chief strategy and growth officer of the NFL. And that person, his name is Chris, went to the same undergrad that you did. And I said, "Oh, well, why don't we have that first conversation, right? And then the rest is history." So that was inflection point number two. Not quite as big as inflection point number one, but pretty big. Because you might ask me, was I nervous about the American Express Financial Services data and analytic playbook working in sports? Oh, yeah, I was nervous. But it in fact did work. And from there, I went on to become the chief data and analytics officer for General Motors. And guess what? The playbook worked in manufacturing, it worked in automotive. And from there, I went on to PepsiCo. Guess what? It worked in retail, it worked in consumer packaged goods. And it was towards the tail end of my stay at PepsiCo, I was there about 3 years, that the AI and large language model revolution just started. And I had the feeling that this would be quite the inflection point. And this incredible opportunity to join the New York Jets, I've been a lifelong New York Jets fan, came around. And I will tell you the sheer exponential acceleration of data and analytics that my team is seeing because of AI is second to none. I've just never seen anything like it before. And so I would leave you with one piece of advice from this. Um, and that is, and it's a modified version, Florence and Emily, of the Wayne Gretzky quote, which is optimize when it comes to careers. Don't optimize for the safest next step. Optimize for where the puck is going, right? Because I could have said no to Ash. And quite frankly, I probably would have been fine and happy, but I think I would have missed one of the most important pivot points in my career. I could have said no to the NFL as well, and I'd still be in financial services. Would that be okay? Yeah, it would have been okay, but my goodness, the opportunities that I've been fortunate enough to see because I went where the puck was going, pretty amazing. So definitely think about optimizing for where the puck is going. All right, so enough about my career. Let's transition to, and Emily, we can, yeah, that's good. Um, I wanted to give you a little bit of a teach into, well, what does a chief data and analytics officer at a sports team actually do? And so I'd like to show that to you. And Emily, we can go to the next page. Yeah, so here you can see a couple of my core responsibilities. You can see the football and you can see the business. So I am sitting here in our facilities in New Jersey, and my office physically sits at the intersection of football and business, meaning half of the building here are business people, half of the building here are football people. My office literally sits at the 50-yard line where I am zooming in is at the 50-yard line. And that's really critical because it's symbolic in terms of us supporting both sides of the building. So on the football side, we work directly with what's known as the general manager, right? And the general manager runs all of football. His name is Darren. And I report into Darren. And we support all of his coaching and scouting staff. We define the analytical priorities that help his staff inform player evaluation, in-game strategy, draft, roster construction. The list goes on and on. So in essence, we create and support and develop decision support infrastructure for Darren. What does that mean in real life? Well, we integrate football tracking data, biometrics, performance information, scouting reports, all into actionable insights for the coaching and scouting staff. We also build predictive models for all of the simulations that we do in football, and quite frankly, any sport does tons and tons of simulations. So that's football. On the business side, I report into a different person, our chief operating officer, Brian Friedman. So I report into two different leaders here at the Jets, and that is by design. On the business side, we lead all of the data-driven initiatives across marketing, ticketing, sponsorship, customer relationship management, fan engagement, the stadium operations. And we do that by building dashboards, forecasts, predictive models, customer segmentations to support all forms of revenue growth. And so that's a very different type of different or decision support infrastructure. Think of it as Moneyball, right? That Moneyball signal. But unlike Moneyball, we apply it to every part of the Jets organization, not just player selection. All right, so these are just two of the responsibilities within the Chief Data and Analytics Office. Emily, let's go to the next page. So I have three more responsibilities here. And one that's really very interesting to be part of our remit here is application development. What does that mean? That is building and maintaining all of the internal tools that both the football and business operations teams rely on every day. And I do credit Brian Friedman, our COO, for his foresight in having this be part of my organization because it's one thing to have world-class data and analytics, and I'll show you my organization in just a minute. But it's another thing to be able to immediately manifest those data and analytics into whether it's Power BI or web applications that all of our front office staff, our coaches, our scouts, our salespeople, our marketers, all of them can access immediately to support their decisions. Artificial intelligence, strategy, and oversight. This is a huge part of the role. And quite frankly, almost every conversation I have with our owner, Woody Johnson, is AI strategy focused. And this encompasses all functions, right? What are the opportunities for machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing, large language models, and critically governance, which we will wrap up with some governance components there. And then as a member of the executive team, my last responsibility there, leadership and strategy, I do serve as the strategic advisor from a data and analytics and AI perspective to the executive team. And so this goes back to what Ash was saying, we do need that key skill, not necessarily of being the smartest data scientist in the room, because I will tell you, I am not. There are many scientists who are way, way smarter than I am. My job is to connect the data insights to business and football decisions, right? It's everything that Ash Gupta said to me back at American Express. I carry that with me always. All right, let's go to the next page. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how our team is organized. I'm going to start in the middle. So in the middle is Paul Marsh. He runs all of application development for me and actually predates me by 24 seasons. Paul is a veteran of this organization called the New York Jets. And quite frankly, from day one, 24 years ago, Paul supported both the business and football side. So the Jets really had it in their DNA from an applications perspective to have that dual support. What we're now doing with Ashley on the far left as my head of business analytics and Sean on the far right as my head of football analytics is to bring both the analytics and the application development pieces together. And then what you see on the bottom are external partners. And this is a key learning that I had many years ago, which is partner with the best because you want market best solutions and you don't always want to build yourself. If there are certain types of services, offerings, or even staff augmentation, which we might view as commoditized, better to rent than build, right? Because this is a world, particularly data and analytics and technology, it's a world that changes very, very rapidly, right? Build yourself when you know you have a competitive edge that is lasting, rent when you think you have a commoditized service. And so we have a whole slew of partners there. Okay, and again, on the business side, on the far left, you see my name twice on this org chart. It is by design. I report into our chief operating officer on the far left. I report into our general manager on the far right. Okay, all right, let's go to the next page, the AI revolution. So I want to now transition to what are we doing here at the Jets? And so let's go to the next page. And I am going to share with you a framework that I call the three horizons of AI deployment. It is a structure that I developed at PepsiCo, and it works very much like the crawl, walk, run pyramid that you might think about, but it is very much tuned to AI deployment. Horizon One is all around baseline productivity, getting everybody to use AI every day. And that means, our entire front office, meaning all of our non-player staff. We are a Microsoft shop, so we use Microsoft Copilot. We went from zero adoption of Microsoft Copilot to 91% active adoption in about 100 days. And that average active user making 62 prompts per month, right? So more than two or three a day. Uh, Now, in terms of football gains or business gains here, pretty modest, I'll be quite frank. But what really matters is we have changed the DNA of the organization to think AI first. And it's really from that baseline productivity that we understand Horizon 2, which is true workflow automation. And true workflow automation is deep double-digit gains in both football and business. Examples, AI agents that automate research, analysis, reporting. So we released, or the NFL released, the NFL schedule, essentially our game schedule, just a few weeks ago. One of the things that we did is we ran more than 100,000 Monte Carlo simulations to stress test our ticket pricing. Now, why is that important to do before the schedule release? Because if you do that before the schedule release, you can release your pricing hours after the schedule release, not days. And that is pretty incredible. We've got 17 such automations happening in that number two, that Horizon 2. Horizon 3, it's all about competitive advantage, decision infrastructure, hybrid human and AI teams. Here, we're doing 4 years of traditional human deployment, whether it's software engineering, data science engineering, data engineering, 4 years on average every 90 days because of this hybrid workforce. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few pages. All right, so yeah, let's go to the next page because I can do a little bit of a deeper dive into each of the horizons. So we've got Horizon 1, baseline productivity. Um, I will tell you, in my experience, most companies skip this horizon. They're so focused on double-digit gains in Horizon 2 and true workflow automation, they skip this step. In my mind, this is a bad step to skip. One, because you never get the full organization up to a common baseline of AI proficiency. And second, this is the group of people that are best positioned to spot where the Horizon 2 opportunities exist. Now, how did we do this? Workshops, office hours. And honestly, and Florence knows this, for the first 100 days of my being a New York Jet, I actually had lunch at a different cafeteria table every day just to talk about AI and just to get it into the minds of the everyday. This isn't something of a set it and forget it. It takes a lot of work to get here. All right, let's go to that next page, which is Horizon 2. Some real examples here of Horizon 2. And you look on the left-hand side, the NFL Combine, this is where 340, 350, 360 of the top college players across the United States show up. And the media would have you believe that it is for these players to show up and show the recruiting NFL teams the physical tests, right? How fast am I? How far can I throw the ball? How accurate am I? And it is all that, believe me. However, it is also a time for each of those 340 players to undergo medical exams. Now, the way that medical information is transmitted to each of the 32 teams is completely unstructured medical dictation in every arcane branch of medical science known to man. And historically, it has taken 3 to 4 weeks to sift through that unstructured data. With AI, we can now do it in a day. And by the way, with better quality and consistency. That means better decisioning. That means better uh, coaching and scouting decisioning, right? We also, you can see the player research, right? We often want to understand well beyond the 340, 350 players that show up at NFL Combine for the thousands of draft eligible players who we might be looking at in the seventh round of the draft. Well, what about personal character? What about football character? How do we understand that? That used to be weeks and weeks of research, which historically no team has ever completed for the thousands of draft eligible players. We can now, in a matter of days, complete all of it. And then Titan is our internal coaching and scouting facing application. It is a cloud native application, so we use coding agents pretty extensively here. We can stand up app after app after app in a matter of days. Used to be weeks, used to be months. Right. And then on the right-hand side, we talked about the Monte Carlo. We also have a fully autonomous media agent that goes out and scrapes daily news coverage and daily social media coverage every day. This used to take hours and hours and hours of a communications analyst. Now it's done in minutes. We also do a whole lot of workflow automation, particularly in the sponsorship arena. And so these are just a few examples of the types of workflow automation that are driving deep double-digit gains. And now let's go to Horizon 3 on the next page. This is a new frontier, the hybrid workforce, where leaders are managing teams of both humans and AI agents. And as I said before, on average, every 90 days, we're generating 4 years of human output. So we're talking multiplicative gains. This is no longer double-digit gains. We can also do consulting studies, which we could never do before because consulting studies often require about $100,000 check to all of the consulting outfits that we could name. Now, in about an hour and $100 in large language model tokens, we're done. And so this has really changed the game. However, this sounds a lot easier than what is actually required to get it done. I like to use the analogy that AI coding agents are like summer interns. Summer interns require a ton of context. Of course they do. But unlike interns, once you set them in a direction, they will outproduce even the most seasoned engineers on your team. So a set it and forget it approach does not work. It wastes a ton of cost and a ton of money. The winners in this space know how to manage agents, AI agents, AI coding agents in a way that's kind of like the summer intern, but it's also kind of like the let's deploy that seasoned engineer. It is not an easy thing to do, but we're getting better and better at it every day. For all of you, I would say the most practical takeaway of this entire hour that we're together is learn how to direct AI agents. This is probably the most important skill, professional skill, which again, even the New York Jets were still learning how to do it. Start building it today. You can learn how to do it for free in your own personal life. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we wrap up as well. And now, if we go to the next page, we have covered this, many of the elements on this slide, but this is how when we talk to the executive team, we talk every month. We provide an executive update on AI. This is really how we like to talk about it. And you can see all of the numbers, which we talked about on the prior slide. You can see on the left-hand side, on the bottom, many of the initiatives that we've covered. On the right are all of the what's nexts, and this was probably about 60 days ago. for an executive update at the time. And as I look at all of the examples, and you can self-read them on the right, um, it is striking me now that 60 days later, we're done with all of the things on the right. And what I wanted to share with you is that this actually reminds me when I was interviewing for this role last summer, and again, I spent a lot of time with our owner, Woody Johnson. I ended up writing a 2-year business plan for him. And the other day, Woody Johnson, our owner, he called me and he said, uh, in complete candor, Iwao, I didn't actually read your business plan when you were interviewed because we had so many great conversations. I didn't really feel the need to read it. However, I read it last night and it's really good. I really enjoyed reading it. It does strike me, however, that we're nearly done with your 2-year plan 100 days later. So what's next? You know, and I said, oh my goodness, yeah, that is interesting. And what I would share with this group is there were two things that I would credit this accelerated deployment to, two things I wouldn't have known at the time I wrote that business plan last summer. One was AI and the pace of change in the tooling, particularly AI agents, particularly Horizon 3. Who even was thinking about that a year ago? Not too many. The second is I hadn't met the broader JETS organization. And as it turns out, having sat with everybody in the cafeteria during my listening tour, every AI deployment that I talked about were the types of things that everybody wanted to do, but folks didn't have the leadership and the focus to get it done. And so it wasn't a matter of influencing and changing and driving change. It was a matter of just leading folks to where they wanted to be anyway. And so the key takeaway here is that AI in sports, it's not theoretical. It is shipping product, it's generating revenue today. And if we go to the next page, in fact, I had a workshop this morning with a wonderful partner of ours, CrowdIQ, who have incredible technology with high definition cameras and measuring crowd flow. This is a mock-up of a intelligent operations command center, which will be manifested on the phone for all of our game day personnel, beginning with our preseason opener against Tampa Bay. And, these are all the KPIs that will enable us to do things in a way that we've never done before, right? Imagine knowing within minutes that the MetLife entrance has a bottleneck and we need to dispatch extra staff. Hey, we have lots and lots of families in section XYZ. Hit the concession stand with more hot dogs. We could never do that before. This season, we can do all of those things. And that's really exciting for us. So what's next? Let's go to the next slide, Emily, because there are some challenges. Now that I have been in role for a little while here, about 4 months, I'm realizing that getting AI into production was not the hard part. It looked pretty hard about 100 days ago, but it was actually not the hard part. The hard part is keeping it governed. What does that mean? Well, governance, we have the 17 workflow automations that we just talked about. Well, what do we do when the 17 becomes 170? Who certifies every AI agent? How do we certify? How do we prevent ungoverned experimentation that creates risk for our organization? These are the questions that we're looking at now. Model registry. Do we need a way to track models? Which models are powering which workflows? What about version control? What about the data that is being used? Is it accurate? Is it up to date? Certification. Do we allow everybody to build agents, or is there a certification program? Probably there should be a certification program. And then, of course, trust and transparency, prompt evaluation frameworks. How do we ensure there's no bias in our models? What are the constraints? What are the self-evaluation layers? So lots and lots to do around governing AI. And then if we go to the next page, this is my last slide. Um, there is a media headline out there. And because of that media headline, every talk I give to students, and this includes Columbia, NYU, Johns Hopkins, Drexel, Princeton, name the university, I get the same question. Is AI killing entry-level jobs? And look, the anxiety is real. Florence, I'm sure you saw the headline that our alma mater recently eliminated the 133-year tradition of unproctored exams, the honor code. And why? Well, it's to control ungoverned use of AI. That's one approach. I happen not to agree with that approach because I have a much more hopeful perspective, but it's also more demanding. And what I say to universities when I talk to their students is, listen, in the real world, organizations like the New York Jets use AI to do better work. That is the reality. Okay, so to prepare for that world, because it is happening, this is not a theoretical construct, better to go with it and prepare for it than resist it. And so here would be my advice to you. I know many universities prohibit the use of AI for assignments. In fact, my daughter just graduated from college and her university also prohibited it. So my recommendation to you is for a couple of major assignments, do the assignment twice. Do it once on your own and do it a second time using AI. Because that second time, you're actually building the real world skills that will land you that first role, right? The people who become AI native will be the ones who get hired. Entry level jobs are not going away. They are definitely not going away. But they are changing. They are changing. And that's where, to me, I'm very optimistic about early career talent. AI doesn't shrink what a young professional can contribute. It actually expands it by multifold. You just saw it. And that entry level professional who arrives fluent in AI and is AI native is really in the thick of things. And that to me makes you more valuable, not less. All right. So I am going to wrap up there. I know we wanted to do some Q&A. Uh, and I'm not sure, Florence and Emily, how we were going to do the Q&A.
Well, this has been wonderful, Iwao. I always learn something whenever I speak with you or listen to you. So thank you so much. And everyone was very engaged. So there are actually a bunch of questions in the chat. And so I can read them to you.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That would work out. So if we go, some of them you actually answered while you were speaking, but
Okay.
one of the first ones that came out is how does the data collection look? What does that process look like as you do it internally? Is it in-house? And then on a scale of 1 to 10,
Mm.
one being least likely to 10 most likely, how much are sporting decisions made through data?
Oh, a great couple of questions. So much of sporting data, and this is somewhat, I would say, specific to the land of sports, much of sporting data is governed by the league. So the NFL, as an example, produces all of the player position data. And the reason they do that is they don't want teams who are very wealthy having an inherent advantage from a data perspective versus teams who are not as wealthy. And the whole concept of competitive equity is core to the NFL product, and I believe it's core to many league products. How fun is it to watch a sporting event when you know who's going to win? That's not that fun. And so competitive equity is quite the big deal. So most of it is external. We do, however, use our own analytics, number one, to cleanse the data, and then number two, to create what I like to call a consumption layer.
Mm.
So the data that we get from the NFL around players is raw, right? And it's not consumable by any of our applications. And so we use AI and other forms of transformation to make it consumable. On the business side, very similar, right? So ticketing data, as an example, no surprise, much of our ticketing data comes from Ticketmaster. Much of our concessions data come from our concessions partner, a company called Delaware North. And so mainly what we do is we take that externally sourced data and create our own competitive edges around it. Um, so hopefully that helps. Florence, there was a second part to that question.
Yes, and this was on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least likely to 10 being most likely. How much are sporting decisions made through data rather than, instinct? And you could say
Oh, sure.
instinct is data. That's the way I look at it, right? It's just a different form of data. But,
I think that's right.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 The analogy I used with our general manager is if you are an well, incredibly instinctive poker player, as a for instance, and you happen to know how to count cards, I would advise you, if you're going to Las Vegas, to count cards. Because no matter how good your instincts are as a poker player, you want to know the odds. And so that is the service that we provide to the general manager, which is we give the coaches and the scouts all of the odds and essentially all of the decision support infrastructure. I am not a football native. I grew up in Japan. I will never have the type of football instinct that any of our coaching or scouting staff have. But I am pretty good at standing up an enterprise data program to create those competitive edges in the information, in the speed of delivery, in the manifestation of the insights. And so I would say it's really a 50-50 of the human instinct and the decision support infrastructure.
that's wonderful. That's a great answer. Thank you. Um, there was a question about why you weren't in the center of one of the charts and you were on both sides, but you explained why, because you have a direct line into both sides. And
I
that's
do.
That's like
Yeah.
a political thing for all of us to learn from, right? Is you can say, well, I kind of
Yes.
work with both of you, but people will be like, yeah, but do you really care about me? And so I think that's
Yes.
very wise. And so those of you listening, think about that as you go on in your career of how you make it clear that you're listening to people in ways like that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Then there are a couple more questions. For people with a science or engineering graduate background, what skills and experiences do you find to be the most helpful or important for success in getting and performing well in a data analytics job?
That's a great question and one that really comes into my heart. And, Florence, you and I are of the same background where we studied aerospace engineering, which is a wonderful major. It provides a basis for the types of analytics that we do today in the data and analytics profession. But I never studied data science or data engineering at all, actually, right? Learned everything on the job. And I would say today, everybody here on the call, has the advantage of, in fact, getting a formal education, a formal set of skills in data science, in data engineering, and software engineering, wherever your career will take you. Uh, but I think much like Florence and Iwao, having that natural curiosity to reinvent yourself. I will tell you, when Ash came by and he said, you're going to start, the company's first data and analytics function, I really had to reinvent myself. And
Yeah,
I will tell you, I was quite anxious about it. I wasn't sure if I could do it. It was quite a pivot. And the fact is, everybody can do it. You have to just
absolutely.
put your mind to it. And
Thank
so I think that quest, that intellectual curiosity, and today the pivot, as I was saying before, it's AI. So if you have a formal education in data science, how do you leverage AI, whether it's in the land of coding assistants or coding agents or a little bit of both? How do you leverage that to bring multiplicative gains to your output? The only thing I would recommend is, I happen to use Claude Code. Don't install it on your phone because if you do, it keeps asking you questions. Like you'll be at dinner, and it'll say, "Oh, hey, how do you want the output structured?"
Yeah.
Uh,
It
okay.
never sleeps, huh?
I
It never
didn't, yeah,
sleeps.
I didn't need to answer that question now while I'm trying to eat dinner.
I know, right? But you're a great role model, and thank you so much for sharing like your personal side, the business side, the analytics side. This is very valuable. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure.
You a few more questions. You're very popular. Do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, or do you have a little more time, Iwao?
I can be a couple minutes late to my next one. I'll have them start without me.
Okay,
So, yeah.
well, we have a bunch of questions here. So let me try to go to someone else's question then.
Sure.
Ooh, I don't know what this means, so maybe you can answer it. Um,
Sure.
can you speak a little bit about guardrail design?
Yes, that's I would say it's one of the most challenging pieces of the AI puzzle right
Mm,
now.
okay.
Right? Because if we go hard on the guardrails, and let's say, and by the way, we had a big philosophical debate on this. Should we give Microsoft Copilot licenses to everybody, including our coaching and scouting staff? And there was a part of the organization that said that sounds very risky.
Mm,
And I said, well, let's take the risk because if we do too much of the guardrailing, we don't get it up. We never would have gotten to 91% in 100 days. And so we can still monitor, which we do. We can still monitor the use. And quite frankly, because of the phone, if we didn't put Copilot, we have the enterprise version. If we didn't put Copilot on the desktops and the iPads and the work phones of everybody, folks might begin to use AI on their phone, which is a big no-no here, right? Because anything you use on your phone, it becomes public domain. And so we said, you know what? Let's, on the one hand, loosen the guardrails and get the tools in everybody's hands. On the other hand, we are very firm about do not use your browser and your personal Claude account or Gemini account, like a pop-up screen is going to pop up. But on the other hand, hey, we've got office hours. Iwao himself will come visit you and do a teach-in. You know, happy to do it. But it's a balance, right? Because if you lean too hard in either direction, it's either an adoption curtailment or there's risk to the enterprise. So it's a great question.
yeah, there are a lot of great questions here. We're not going to get to all of them, but there.
I'm happy to answer some of them offline as well. So
Oh, that's very thoughtful. You know what we can probably do is, Emily, maybe we can send the chat
yeah,
to Iwao, and if he wants
yeah,
to answer
happy to
that
do
one.
it.
This one I think will be interesting as a getaway. Hi, Iwao. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I am currently with a pro sports team as well. Ooh, how
Who
do you?
is that?
This is Rudy Rivera. Do you know Rudy?
Oh, sounds familiar. We may have seen each other at a conference.
Oh, cool. So, Rudy, you
Yeah.
can put who you are in the chat if you want. So he says, I am currently with a pro team sports as well, pro sports team as well.
Yes.
How do you think data analytics will expand to other departments within the team as well? Or
Yes.
will it solely be business and team operations? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. So I only spoke about well, the functions within football and then a handful of functions within the business side, right? So sales, ticketing, marketing, communications, those being the functions. We've been, I would say, this goes back to the guardrail question. We've been, I would say, slower from an HR perspective, slower from a legal perspective, just because there are other considerations, right? From a privacy point of view, from a legal risk point of view. But I would say we're already beginning to see some very, very big wins. When you think about large language models, they are incredibly well suited for many HR and legal processes. And then the other group that I did not mention was finance. And finance would be the other area that literally we are hosting workshops this week to begin getting some significant traction on the finance side. So super, super excited. Yeah, I can't think of a function that does not make sense from an AI perspective. So
So I agree with you. So, Iwao, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your insights. Um,
yes, for
well,
sure.
you've taught us that data science is a team sport. You've taught us that data scientists are really general practitioners, and you can apply this in many different domains, which is very cool to know, and how to use data science and AI to create the future, which is what you're doing. So thank you so much for doing that. We'll send you the questions, and then maybe we can
Great.
post them somewhere in our Slack channel or something. And
Awesome.
thank you everyone for joining us. It was a very
Thank
engaging
you.
group, and you're part of a cool team, everyone who's here. So stay involved and stay connected, and we look forward to keeping in touch with all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Iwa. We'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.